we turn to a unique feature in the land of enchantment. The natural beauty of New Mexico draws many people to our state, and White Sands National Monument is one favorite of both tourists and residents. Photographer Greg Varjabedian recently released a book of photographs that captures White Sands at different times of the day. It's amazing, and various times of the year. He sat down recently with producer Sarah Gustavus to talk about his work and how photography can be a part of a broader conversation about history and public places.
Craig Varjabedian, thank you for joining us today at New Mexico PBS.
What a pleasure.
You photographed iconic places across New Mexico. Why did you turn your attention to White Sands in this book?
Wow. White Sands is an absolutely magnificent place. And so it was certainly, at the very least, worthy of going down there and making pictures of it. But I've thought a lot about where this all started and how it began. And certainly it began by just falling in love with the place, which is also really important to my process of making pictures. But it began as a question that Paul Weidman, who's a writer for the Santa Fe, New Mexico newspaper, asked me. He made a comment about how all artists move towards abstraction. And I was struck by that notion and tried to sort of, and I didn't have I was so struck by the remark he made, but I didn't have the awareness of mind to ask him to explain it any further. But I think that what he's saying is true, is that abstraction provides the next challenge. And as a place, White Sands is beautifully, wonderfully, magically abstract. I mean, it's concrete as well, but once you get out into the dunes, you're looking at shape, you're looking at form, and when the light changes, the dunes change.
And the photographs featured in this book are different times of day, different times of year. How do you, as a photographer, capture those abstractions in those different moments?
A lot of times when I'm photographing, I'm really looking for the place to sort of tell me when to photograph it, which I realize sounds a bit metaphysical, but I think of this very much in the same way of making a portrait of a person, that you discover sort of the right moment when you get the right smile or you get the right turn of the eyes or whatever it is. The light is just so. And that's what happened at White Sands. And White Sands gave me great moments. And I'm convinced that it had a really powerful muse out there that would come along and say, you need to go over here.
Was there a particular feeling you had when you were out at White Sands at different times?
Yeah, I sensed that there was a presence there. That's the thing I was really struck by. And just as a little aside, you know, there's a place, I remember walking out into the dunes where the dunes started coming up around me as I was walking up the trail, and I could hear my heartbeat, that it was actually echoing off the dunes. And I thought that was such a powerful thing to have happen, that here I was all of a sudden becoming a part of the place. Anyway, that just bowled me over. And so that and sort of Paul's sort of challenge, indirect challenge maybe, about abstraction really brought me to White Sands. And then once I got there, I just became infected by the place. It's so incredibly beautiful. You know, and it's unlike anything I've ever photographed before. And it's always changing. So for example, if I were to photograph something in let's say, January, if I would expect or try to go back in May, there's a really good chance those dunes would look different or they had moved or everything else, because the dunes are moving. You know, they're moving some distance, you know, throughout the year. And so nothing is the same. And that's the beauty of the challenge. So if I'd mark a place on my GPS and try to go back 6 months later, it'd be gone.
And White Sands, I mean, I lived here almost 9 years before I visited White Sands. I think many folks in New Mexico know about it, but haven't actually seen it for themselves.
You gotta go.
What's the value in having these photographs, though, of sharing this place and these moments you've captured with New Mexicans or with other people around the world?
Well, I think you nailed it. I think it is the notion of sharing. That's one of the great things about photography, is that it allows me the ability to share my experience. And so when I go out and I photograph some resplendent, you know, landscape with gorgeous light on it, you know, say a gorgeous sunset, I can share that with somebody on the other side of the world, which happens frequently now today with social media and that kind of thing. My pictures get out there and they're seen by the world. It's an incredible thing. And as an aside, you know, White Sands is actually one of the most visited places in New Mexico. That more people go to White Sands than go to a lot of other attractions in the state. So it's place with a capital P, I guess.
And one of the things happening right now is there's a lot of talk about protecting public lands, protecting these places for people. How do you think, what's the value in photographing them and in sharing those images around the world and in helping demonstrate the value of a public place like this?
I think that one of the great things about photography is that, for example, you may have at home a picture of your grandmother or your grandfather or your great-grandfather and grandmother. And so you have a record of what they looked like. And I think that just on a very basic level, one of the great things about photographing a place like White Sands is that there is a record of it. And not that other people haven't photographed it. I don't claim to have just found it all by myself. But it's a record of a place at a particular time. And because of the nature of life and place, everything changes. That's something you can go to the bank with. Everything changes. And so it's hard to say what White Sands will look like 100 years from now, but here it is marked, if you will, and in 2017, 2018, of what it looked like today. And so that, I think, is the beauty of photographing a place, and really the beauty of a photograph in the end, is that it's an aid to memory.
I also noticed a photo of people taking photos of White Sands, and
Yeah.
I've seen in other places around New Mexico,
Right.
Folks who are very, amateur photographers, but very committed to the craft. What are the challenges for people who come out and want to photograph White Sands?
At White Sands?
Yeah.
Certainly the light is a big challenge because there's a lot of it, and you've got a lot of reflectance coming off of the sand, particularly at midday. It can be almost blinding out there when the sun is out. I think that the biggest challenge is how do you take such a vast space and photograph it in such a way that you can convey a sense of its bigness through a single image. And for me, that was a huge challenge. Georgia O'Keeffe talked a lot about how when she came to Ghost Ranch, she talked about the way in which she decided to paint the place was to paint the pieces of it. And that's the way I approached White Sands, there was no way I could take a picture that showed the vastness of White Sands for it to make any sense. And so what I did was I just started photographing little pieces of it. The sunsets, the mountains, the dunes, and the various other things that are down there.
Yeah. And as a person who's interested in history, what role did that play in the photographs you chose of the White Sands Missile Range and the Trinity site, and how did you incorporate that into?
Well, I was really struck when I first went down there about 30 years ago by how that the White Sands National Monument is adjacent to the White Sands Missile Range and to the Holloman Air Force Base. And White Sands Missile Range is probably best known among the many things it's done down there. It's known as the location of the Trinity site where the first nuclear bomb went off. And that whole story is absolutely fascinating to me, just what happened and how the United States got there. And the fact that you've got a reminder of that place marked with an obelisk that people in New Mexico go and see by the droves every year. I was intrigued by that whole history. And as an aside, when you're photographing out on the dunes, one of the things that's present is the military presence. There are jets flying overhead, and sometimes sonic booms go off. And sometimes you actually hear blasts going off in various places out there. So, and I've hiked out to where the fence is, the boundary fence, where that says don't go any further than this. And so there's a sense that an awful lot of human history took place surrounding and maybe even including White Sands National Monument. And so that was the draw. That was really interesting. And then reading about that history just made the place, if it wasn't alive already, became even more alive.
And what about the V2 project? That's a history people know a little bit less of that was happening out there.
Yeah, so before the end of World War II, before the end of Germany's involvement in World War II, I should say, the Allies went into Germany to bring the rocket scientists out and of course bring the rocket technology to the United States. And they brought all of the people out very quickly, and they loaded all of the V2 rockets and the stuff on boats, and they brought it over, and they brought it to Alamogordo. And that's where the V2 was kind of reignited, if you will, in the United States. And this is how America became a part of the space program, was right in Alamogordo. And you can actually take tours down there and see the gantry, which is the thing that holds the rocket up on the missile range, where all of this began. Anyway, I'm inspired by that.
Is there a particular photo in this book that has some personal significance for you that's really special?
Wow. Well, many of the pictures in this book have a personal significance because things went on, when I made them. I think the one that probably stands out is I made a photograph just as I was making my way out to the gate. You have to leave White Sands at 7 o'clock. It's unlike many national parks that are open 24 hours. White Sands closes down at about an hour after sunset every day. And I turned around as I was walking out, and I happened to see this crescent moon rising over a dune, and with some beautiful sunset kind of blues and yellows and oranges kind of behind it. And I made a picture of it. And I remember liking the picture when I made it. And a couple days later, I happened to be working at it on my computer, and I pulled it up, and I happened to check the date and time that it had been made. And I had made the photograph on my 57th birthday. And I happened to look at the time code, and it said that I had made the photograph at the moment I was born, the moment I came into the world. And I thought, well, that's fortuitous. That's just an interesting little thing that happened. And then I did a little more research because the web is amazing for this, and I found out that the moon that's up in the sky is the same size, if you will, the same phase, I suppose, as it was the day I was born. So it would have been what my father would have seen when he left the hospital that night. And I just lost my dad, so it was important for me. It was just a way of reconnecting, if not, just out there in the ether. It was a way for me to kind of reconnect to my dad again.
Has technology changed your work as a photographer?
It's funny you should ask that question. I began my work as a photographer in film, traditional film, where you developed it in a darkroom. And I went to graduate school thinking that I was learning the technology that I would complete my career with. And literally just before I was leaving, I saw a demonstration of digital photography, and I realized at that moment, boy, this was all going to change. And boy, did it ever, And so, often the argument that comes along with that comment is, which one's better? Well, I think it's easy to demonize one or the other, but I think that the gift of both of them is that what it does incredibly well. And if one uses it at the service of the artist or uses it at the service of the person taking the photograph, then the technology in and of itself is not bad.
Craig, what do you want your legacy to be as a photographer in New Mexico? You've been here for many years, but when you think about your legacy, what are some things you'd like to leave behind?
I hope when I take the final climb, I hope that my pictures will give people a record, a sense of what it was like to be here at this time. At this time, because it's a time of great change. Not that other times weren't times of great change, but this is my time. This is my time, and so hopefully I'll provide a record of that. And I hope in the end too that somebody will look at these pictures and say, this guy did a good job. That would be the ultimate compliment, I think, that somebody said that I did a good job.
Well, thank you. I think that thought, so much is in line with the photographs in this book, and as you said, of White Sands changing all the time, and you're right, New Mexico changing all the time. It was a pleasure to talk with you today. Thank you so much for joining us.
Oh, thanks. I really appreciate it.